Hi, morning. Someplace it's tropical, someplace it's springtime, just not here today. Welcome. Let's begin by having prayer. Let's begin by shutting this door, maybe. That'd be another good thing. So let's have prayer. Let's bow our heads. Thank you, Father, for this morning and for today being Sabbath and us gathering here. We invite your presence to help us understand and learn, help us to appreciate you and your love better. We thank you. Amen. Okay. Well, I trust it's been a good week or good enough. You're here, so that's a good sign. Lesson 7. If you're using the online Sabbath School quarterlies, I've noticed that this quarter, when you sign in Sabbath morning, it takes you to next week's Sabbath School lesson. You have to go to the previous lesson and kind of back click it. For a while, I thought you couldn't get back to the back ones. Then I found that previous lesson button. If you want some help with it, I can help you after Sabbath School, maybe. The problem of evil. Is evil a problem?
Yeah.
Come on now. Don't we live in a perfect world where there's no evil, no problems, no... I live on a very optimistic side of town. Tell me about this evil, the problem with evil. I'm sure everybody in here has probably lost somebody that has died. Is that evil?
That is evil.
Probably a result of evil. Yep, sin, evil, kind of the same thing. How many of you have been sick? Hurt yourself, broke a leg, had a car accident, had your horse die on you on the way to school? Well, that's another story.
Or even falling in the parking lot around
And break your leg.
church. Break a foot.
Yeah, I try to subtract all the bad stuff from what we experience and say that's what heaven's going to be like. And you know something? I can't hardly wrap my mind around that. It's such a prevalent part of our existence, the bad stuff. And it seems like it's out of balance, doesn't it? If you was to look back over your life, would you say there's been more bad than good, more good than bad?
More bad than good, but right now things are good.
It's kind of like we like on a roller coaster a lot of times, aren't we? There's good times, bad times. You know, in other cultures, they try to explain this, and it's kind of fascinating how they go about it. In the Chinese culture, they have this notion of yin and yang, okay?
Okay,
Yin and yang. And they have this balance, or at least they think they do, between, well, lots of things. Good and evil is one of them. And this kind of balance doesn't really make any sense to me, okay? Because it kind of makes me think that there's an equal amount of each. Yin and yang, yeah. This is the Chinese and Mandarin. In other cultures, like in Korea, they actually put it on their flag. It's a different kind of yin and yang symbol. And then they've got the 4 different, cardinal directions, 4 different elements. There's all kinds of ways of explaining those 4 other symbols. In Chinese, the yin and yang, the words for them and the characters actually have the sun and the moon as kind of opposites. And it's just not the sun and the moon. There's 2 characters, there's 2 radicals for each character that they have. And The first one is full moon, full sun. So it's like 100% either direction. That's, in my mind, this is rather optimistic. Okay? I think I've lived a pretty sheltered life in some ways, a very blessed life in lots of ways. I'm not sure I'd say there's 50-50. Okay? I think back of all the good stuff and say, would I have given up all the good stuff just not to have had the bad stuff? I'm not sure what that even means. But sounds boring. Of course, a corollary question, would heaven be boring then? It's all good, huh? Try to get back to Sabbath school lesson here. See, my problem is I like using my phone, but my eyes really like the big screen. It's like having the enlarged print, and then you can zoom in if you need to. The memory verse this week is, these things I have spoken to... Wait a minute. I got to go to previous lesson like I was telling you all. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Who is he talking about? Who is this text talking about? Wipe away every tear from their eyes. Kind of like people that are now going to heaven. Yeah. The ransomed. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow. Wow. Nor crying. There should be no more pain. Where do you sign me up? No more pain? For the former things have passed away. Revelations 21:4. Revelation has some pretty nice stuff at the end of it, doesn't it? You read the end of the book and you kind of find all the good stuff there. I guess for just a moment, let's try to wrap our minds around what it's promising here. Every tear shall be wiped away. Does that mean our memories are going to be wiped away? How do we get to a point where there's no more tears? They wipe away every tear from their eyes. You're here? You made it? That'd be kind of funny. Somebody say that to you. And then you find somebody that, you was hoping to be there that they're not there. And I think that's why we got that 1,000 years. That's kind of like the orientation period, isn't it? 1,000 years to kind of get acclimated to things. But I try to wrap my mind around no more death. How much of our life and things we do revolve around death in all its various forms? The Buddhists have a philosophy, if you're a very devout Buddhist, to don't eat anything that had to die. So they don't eat things like onions that had to die. They'll eat rice because it's dying anyway. There's some things they don't want to eat because they don't want to kill anything. You think of all the death kinds of things we deal with. Why do we drive 55 when it says 55? We don't want to die, ultimately, right? Or we don't want to lose our money with a ticket, which if you lose too much of that, you might die, I guess, ultimately. Yeah. No more sorrow. No more crying. I'm afraid I'm just not smart enough nor good enough to understand what this really means completely. I just don't know what that's like. But I'm not going to discount it. I'm going to accept it and say, wow, that's cool, although it's beyond me. We'll talk more about things that are beyond me in a little bit. Perhaps the greatest problem facing Christianity is the problem of evil. How to reconcile the fact that God is perfectly good and loving and the fact of evil in this world. In briefest terms, if God is all good and all powerful, why is there evil and so much of it too?
Because of the problem-free choice.
Oh, don't go that. That's down on Wednesdays and Thursdays. But have you ever been at a point in your life where you're saying, God, why in the world are you doing that? Why did you allow that to happen? And we just don't got an answer for it. It says this is not merely an academic problem, but something that deeply troubles many people and that keeps some from coming to know God and God's love. Do you know anybody that's left the church or left God because of they can't see the love through the sorrow and love through the pain and love through the whatever? It's the negative. Yeah, I know a bunch of people like that. I do. It says, too many minds, the origin of sin and the reason for its existence are a source of great perplexity. They see the work of evil with its terrible results and woe and desolation, and they question how all this can exist under the sovereignty of one, capital O, one, who is infinite in wisdom, in power, in love. Here is a mystery of which they find no explanation. Many atheists, that's people that claim not to believe in God, identify the problem of evil as the reason they are atheists. And as we will see in this week, in the coming weeks, the God of the Bible is entirely good, and we can trust him even despite the evil that so infects our fallen world. So that's the challenge, I guess, for the Christian. That's the challenge. You got God, who claims to be loving, has done many loving things, yet we have a world that has a lot of evil that he seems to permit. How do we reconcile all that? Because we have to reconcile it on some level, don't we? Otherwise, we become atheists because we just reject it all, possibly. But you know, it says in Sunday's lesson that this problem of evil is not a contemporary one. It's not something we've just recently come across. It's been around for a while. Let's go to the book of Job. Job 30, to be exact. Job 30, verse 26, please. Now let's just kind of go back while we're finding this verse. What was Job's situation? Let's just review a little bit here. What was Job's situation? When did he live? He was kind of contemporary with maybe Abraham, maybe something like that. Okay. That was a long time ago. That's like 2000 BC, long time ago. Was he Hebrew? Well, if he's Abraham's contemporary, probably not, because Hebrews didn't come around till later, when they became a group of people. How close did he live to the flood? How close did Abraham live to the flood? Not too far from the flood, was it? If you figure the long life periods and how they would overlap, I mean, couldn't Abraham have talked to somebody who talked to somebody? You know what I'm saying? With just word of mouth, just a couple of generations away from the flood, something, I forget what the exact amount of years would be, but even if it was 500 years, whatever it would be overlapping enough. The flood was kind of a big event, wasn't it? Kind of a big event, and it was all caused because of sin, right? And God doing this seemingly horrific thing. Why did God cause the flood again? To cleanse the earth of sin. And see, that worked real well, didn't it? Well, pretty soon, Noah's sons, got evil, and things just became just as bad as before, almost. Eventually it would. But I guess in this, with the flood notion, I know we're getting a little off track here. Does that depict a loving God to you that would destroy the earth with a flood? Be careful before you answer that. What would have happened if he hadn't cleansed the world with a flood? Yeah, see, that's the thing you got to ask the question. What would have happened if he hadn't? Yes, that was a weird, strange act, but what would have been stranger had he left? Would it have been more loving to let it go or to cut it short? And see, that's the kind of question we have to ask in our own lives a lot of times, especially as for us that are living, I believe, in the last days, is when God does something, we got to look beyond what's immediately right in front of us and see what's the big picture here. How does it affect things more globally, or at least on a large scale? But anyway, we got Job here, and he had his world, and it was set up. And what happened behind the scenes that Job didn't have much of an idea of, probably? Yeah, God and the devil. I imagine there's this big meeting someplace, and Satan goes, "Look at me. I'm representing the earth down here," and God goes, "Look at that guy down there. You didn't get him. That Job, he's my man." And Satan says, "What? That's because you blessed him. You just quit blessing him. He won't be your man. He'll stop loving you." And God says, "Okay." There are several. I think there's another conversation that, but you can't touch his body, and then, well, you can touch his body and inflict him with. And Job was faithful, wasn't he? Was his faith perfect? Did he ever question God? Yes.
But I'll trust him even if he takes my life.
Right.
And that was what he was committed.
So Job was committed to God. God was good. He trusted God, but he still was questioning God. Are we allowed to question God?
Yes.
I'd say yes. As,
The Bible says, "Why do you talk so much when you know so little?"
yeah. It's kind of like God allowed him to question, but then he responded. And I guess as long as it doesn't take our faith away from our God. Anyway, it was an issue that Job had to solve in his life. Now, why did God allow this to happen to Job? It makes a great story for us, doesn't it? But on Job's level, what did it do for Job? Job learned more about trusting God, didn't he? He learned more about how God operated. And of course, now that story's for us to learn from. But Job exclaims at one point, "When I looked for good, then evil came unto me. And when I waited for light, there came darkness." My word. So Job's got this dilemma in his mind. going on.
Last night, we were listening to Mark Finlay going over the Sabbath school lesson,
Mm-hmm.
and he brought out the verse of Proverbs, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct. And that really hit me because that's one of my most favorite verses in the Bible. Because I can't lean unto my own understanding, and that's exactly what he was telling Job. I just have to acknowledge him and follow him.
Yeah, we
Trust him.
humans kind of have this problem. And I kind of relate it to children. I deal a lot with schools and kids. And one of the definitions of a child is they cannot conceptualize an intelligence greater than themselves. They can't. They can't imagine the adults in their world, their parents, knowing stuff that they don't know. This is why a little kid, when he looks into the cookie jar and sees one cookie, and takes that one cookie and eats that one cookie, and then mom comes along and says, "Who ate the cookie?" "How did you know?" "Well, mom's smarter than you." That's why she's mom and you're the kid. Okay? So I think we have this kind of thing with God going on too. We think we're pretty smart. And it's a good thing to a point, but not when it interferes with you understanding that God is a lot smarter. A true adult knows there's people out there smarter than they are. Okay? That's what separates you from a kid. And I think that is the same in the Christian walk. We have to know that God is smarter. He can conceptualize things beyond us. I kind of imagine going up to God kind of like an amoeba going up to the space shuttle and trying to understand it. I mean, how does an amoeba understand anything about a space shuttle? Well, we're kind of the same way. We can understand to a point, but like Paul, I think it was Paul that said, we see through a glass darkly. We just don't really get the picture completely.
Scientists think that they know a lot now, and they do, but it's never true. But you know, when we think of all the things that God has done, even name the stars, and now they're finding new things in the, you know, that they never saw before with Hubble. You know, basically, our thinking, even with all the things that we have accomplished in the last few years, is very small compared to what.
Mm-hmm. Think back in your own lives. When were you the smartest in your whole life? When you had it all figured out. I think I was about 17. I thought I knew everything. And then I went to college, and I started growing up, and I went to more college, and I thought I learned an awful lot of stuff. But you know, I have never felt dumber in my entire life than I do today. And I know tomorrow I'm going to feel even dumber, because I'm going to learn stuff between now and then. And the next day I'm going to feel even dumber. Yeah, because you start to understand there's a lot you don't understand. And that is probably a good thing. Probably a good thing. Jeremiah, kind of back to the story here. In Jeremiah 12:1, it says, "Righteous art thou, O Lord, when I plead with thee, yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments." Wherefore doth the way of the wicked prosper? Wherefore are all thy happy that deal very treacherously? Jeremiah's asking the Lord, how come these wicked people prosper? How come they're happy, those that act treacherously? Okay? You see, it's easy for us in our very small little lives, and I know 70, 80, 90 years is pretty small, really. to try to understand the big picture. Okay? Because our big picture is only this big. God's big picture is like way big. So when people like Job and Jeremiah and others start asking questions, it's from a limited perspective. In Psalms, chapter 10, 1, it says, "Why standeth thou afar off, O Lord?" It means, how come you're waiting way over there? "Why hidest thou thyself in times of trouble?" That sounds so human, doesn't it? Is it wrong to make those kind of cries out in pain? Not necessarily, as long as it leads you to a better understanding of God. Okay? Just shows it's a very common thing. Does God really stand afar off? From our perspective, it sure does. But I'm reminded of that poster you've probably seen in like stores where sell posters like these, where there's a couple of footprints in the sand, and then it goes to one set of footprints, and the guy goes, "Well, how come you left me, Lord?" And he says, "Well, where you see one set of footprints, that's when I was carrying you." And it's just a matter of perspective, isn't it? You know, which are you seeing your footprints, or are you seeing God's footprints carrying you? Monday's lesson is that there are many things we do not know. It says, the end of history will come with the triumph of love over evil. We're told that, right? That's the end of the story. But in the meantime, many troubling questions remain. How can we think and talk about the problem of evil in a way that might be helpful? Okay? Let's look at Job 38. Or try to go to Job 38. Now, what the context here is, Job had been asking a lot of questions. Okay? He thought he had some pretty good questions. Did God answer his questions? Did God even explain to him what was going on behind the scenes? Somehow we know what was going on behind the scenes. So at some point, Job must have been told what was happening, that conversation between Satan and God, and you can test my servant kind of thing. But at the time it was happening, did Job know what was happening? Or he just saw all this bad stuff? I think he just saw all the bad stuff. And then God shows up. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. I can just imagine, I'm not sure a dust devil would do God justice. I'm thinking of a tornado. Something really substantial. But anyway, there's this whirlwind thing, and God answers him out of it. Would you listen to a voice coming out of a tornado? I think I might pay a little bit of attention. Have you ever been in a tornado? They get your attention. I've been chased across the prairies a time or two, and it's not fun. You're really paying attention. Right. Hopefully not behind you catching up with you. Chapter 38 says, Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? What does that mean? Words without knowledge is foolishness, aren't they? Okay. Gird up now thy loins like a man. Back in those days, they had loins. I think we still have loins, but there was a loin cloth. They would gird them up. And it was a way of kind of getting everything up and tied off and ready for battle or running or something. Okay? You wouldn't want your skirts to be hanging down. You want them girded up. Anyway, and God says, For I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. So Job's going to have to answer if he can. Verse 4, Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? declare if thou hast understanding. Okay, where were you people when God laid down the foundations of the earth? Where was I? We weren't there, were we? So how would we answer? I don't know. Wasn't there, didn't see it. Verse 5, who hath laid the measure thereof, if thou knowest, or who hath stretched the line upon it? He's using the symbolism of like a straight line, kind of measuring things off. This is where we're going to put the foundation, right here. This is the cornerstone. It's going to run over to here to here. We're going to build the... And he's going, where were you when I did all that stuff? This is kind of a real construction kind of a point of view, isn't it? Verse 6, whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Now think about it. He's talking about building the world. Where's the foundations fastened? Whoa. What's holding up the earth? Where's the foundation? We understand it better than in the day of Job, as far as gravity and inertia and all that kind of stuff. But still, do we really understand what's holding up the earth? More, but it's not a lot, really. Who laid the cornerstone thereof, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth as if it had issued out of the womb? You know, I'm starting to think of Noah. Okay? How did it say it? Who shut up the sea with doors? Is there doors in the sea? The beach is the door? My understanding, I don't know if it's perfect, of the flood was that you had the earth, and around the earth was an envelope of water, suspended up in the atmosphere someplace. And there probably was some water down below. And when it says God opened up the heavens and it rained down on them, and it broke up the bowels of the earth, and it flooded up, it was kind of like all that water was allowed to just come crashing down. Okay? Of course, in geology, you see an awful lot of that erosion and mixing and all that kind of stuff that made the Grand Canyon and all those places. The doors of heaven, is this talking about the flood, which, again, he might have been not too far away from people that had been there and seen that? You know, opening up the doors of heaven? I don't know. He's talking contemporaneously with Job here. Verse 9, when I made the cloud the garment thereof, and thick darkness a swaddling band for it, and break up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors. Still talking about the water, right? And he said, hereto shalt thou come, but no further, and here shall thy proud waves be stayed. He's basically saying, well, this is how the ocean became. And I made it the limits here. You've all been down to the beach, you see where the edges are at. Unless there's something weird happening, that's where it kind of stays. So God's going through this question with Job. Are you smart enough to know all this stuff that I've done? No. Old Job, he's going, I'm feeling dumber and dumber every time you ask another question. Is that how we learn humility? Comparing our brain pans with God's and finding out that we're the creature and he's the creator, right? Last little verse here in lesson 4 says, think about how little we know about anything. Why then should we learn to live with unanswered questions about the most difficult subjects, evil and suffering? You know, not knowing stuff is a good thing because it prompts us to try to know stuff. Okay? It should spark our curiosity. And we should go out and analyze and test and do stuff. This is what scientists do a lot of. And we have advanced a lot of things in medicine and in all the sciences and things because of that. But we have to be humble enough to understand that there are some things we're not probably going to find answers to. It's just beyond us. Just like the questions God posed to Job. They're just kind of beyond us. And that should not make us go out and say, well, there is no God. God is dead. You know, we should prompt us to go, wow, God is great. God is worth paying attention to. He's worth drawing close to. He's worth being our God because he's very, very smart and very, very good about all the things he's smart about.
And I think that the lesson pointed out that if we are fortunate enough to go to heaven, God will reveal to us many things that we don't know.
So if you lack wisdom, seek of the Lord, right? Yeah. The skeptical theist, Tuesday's lesson. God proclaims in Isaiah 55, 8-9, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Again, that amoeba going up to the space shuttle and going, wow, I don't understand what I'm touching here. Well, I'm doing a little anthropomorphizing on the amoeba thing here, so.
That seems like a promise to me.
Okay,
A promise.
pursue that.
Because, you know, we only know so much, but he knows so much more that I can count on him. I can count on him because he knows all. And that's where the trust comes. Trust in him.
You know, it's always a human, I guess, instinct or something to want to understand everything completely before we accept it. Maybe that's just an American thing, I don't know, but it's something about us. But there's a lot we just got to accept, I think, and say, well, eventually, maybe, hopefully, and if not, well, we have eternity to try learning it, whatever it is.
That's why we have evolution, because the scientists, if they cannot think that they know how it is, then they do not want to accept it. And the thing is, like when God created the world and all the rest of it, we only know a part that God said, but we do not know all of it. The rest has to be taken with faith. But basically, even when we look at all the things, even the eye, it is so wonderful, and yet scientists, because they can't prove everything, it's like goodness, so then a lot of them believe in evolution rather than the fact that it's a God that created things.
Science in our modern day and age has got a lot to do with money. Come up with ideas that can make money. We publish our papers in scholarly journals so that people can help make money someplace, somehow. Okay? Grants at universities to do research are based on, okay, you've been successful with this and this and this. Now you've got this proposal, we'll grant you some money to work on that project. So you've got to come up with answers. You can't spend $1 million on a research project and say, well, I don't know what happened. That doesn't work too well. So there's some self-serving there maybe. Down in the lesson it says, one way of approaching the problem of evil based on recognizing how little we know is called skeptical theism. The skeptical theist is one who believes God has good reasons for acting as he does, but But given our limited knowledge, we should not expect to be in a position to know just what those reasons are. Are you a skeptical theist? Does that help you?
We're skeptical
Oh,
about.
okay.
Because it sounds like they believe in God.
But they don't believe in God.
It doesn't say they don't believe in God.
No.
They just don't, we're not expected to know reasons why God does what he does.
So I'm a theist because I believe in God. That's kind of the Latin thing. And I'm skeptical of my understanding in light of what God knows. Does that make more sense?
We're probably all skeptical theists.
Well, that might be a good thing. It's better than being an atheist, a skeptical theist.
I like the latter part of that. It says, for instance, germs floating in the air all around us does not mean there are no germs floating in the air all around us.
I'll believe it when I see it, huh? Well, that means yeah, that's a good line. Down at the end it says, questions here. How can the Adventist understanding of judgment and the sanctuary doctrine shed light on the problem of evil? You ever thought of those things being connected? The sanctuary. What was the sanctuary all about? What did that represent and symbolize? You got this holy place, the most holy place. You sacrifice the blood, which does what? Symbolizes Christ's blood shed for us, right?
Sanctuary shows the story of salvation.
Yeah. Sanctuaries technically are places of refuge. Okay, we go to God for refuge. And we use Christ's blood to cover our sins so we can have that protection, that refuge. It says, is it helpful to you to know that while we have many questions now, the details of history and God's righteous judgments will be revealed in the end? That's something important, I think, to carry with us, is we don't have all the answers. We may not get those for a long, long time, and some of them we may not ever get. I mean, will you ever fully understand God completely, no matter how long you live in heaven and behold his glory face to face? I don't think I'm ever going to do that. Otherwise, you'd become God. And that's pretty hard, right?
Whatever eternity is, we'll be studying on it.
Yeah. Eternity, a million years later, we're still going to go, wow, that's cool. I didn't know that about God. You know? And finally, down to Wednesday's lesson, well, it's going to be our end, the free will defense. You have free will. You could stand up and walk out of here and never come back, or you can come every Sabbath. It's your choice. Nobody makes you do anything. God doesn't make you do anything. If God made you do something, you wouldn't have free will. But then, if you don't have free will to disobey, you don't really have free will to obey either, do you? You're just a robot. Can a God of love who seems to need love, but not in a human way, that's just something he is, he draws it to him. Could there be love without free will? I would suggest not. How do you love somebody that requires the love and forces you to love? Or makes it so you can't do anything else but love? It wouldn't be love anymore, would it? Okay? It wouldn't be love. Do you have to tell your spouse, love me? If you do, you've lost already. So, but if it's voluntary, well, that's the best. Yeah, I'll get it later. says Cine Corporation has created a robot dog called Ibo. It will not get sick, not get fleas, not bite, not need shots, not shed fur. Boy, that'd be great, wouldn't it? My dog shed fur all over the place. Would you trade your flesh and blood dog for Ibo? Would you? If not, how might your choice help you better understand why God created us as he did, with free will despite the risks? Is it okay with God if we get messy? Well, he loves us, so I guess it's okay. Do you love your dog when it gets messy? Yeah. I don't like that part, but it's what makes my dog my dog. Okay?
The reason we like the flesh and blood dogs is because they're excited to see us and they love us and they're loyal. And I don't want to be that way.
But you could program it. It could pretend, yeah. That's the thing.
They love us to see us, excited to see him.
You know, I've said before, I got these two little dogs, and they're both idiots, really. I mean, I love them to pieces, but they're idiots. But they have total 100% loving trust in me. I don't know why. Sometimes I forget to feed them and, dumb things like that, but yeah. And I have prayed many times, Lord, help me be as faithful to you as my dogs are to me. I mean, even if I could just achieve that level, I'd be doing pretty darn good. I mean, that's kind of, they're very trusting, very loving, and they just love it when you come home. My wife's been over helping Joanne. Some of you know she broke her leg and her foot, her ankle part. And those dogs can tell our car half a block down the street. And they start looking out the window, doing the tail wagging thing. And then when she pulls in the driveway, they start barking and barking and barking. And it's really impressive. They really get excited. I'm thinking, do I do that when my God comes to talk to me? Well, I would like to think maybe I could get as excited. But sometimes we almost want to run away a little bit, don't we? Hide ourselves with the fig leaves, as it were. And God takes that into consideration too, doesn't he? So, anyway, I think I heard one bell, maybe two, but I try not to hear the second bell. Let's read the memory of text again. It says, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There should be no more death, no more sorrow, no crying. There should be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. And remember, this is in the context of people with free will, in the context of love and trust that even if we don't completely understand, God's given us everything we need to know to be saved. Maybe not a lot more, but that's not required, is it? Just enough to be saved. So let's take advantage of it. Let's have prayer. Lord, be with us now as we go on to the next part of the church service and throughout the Sabbath. Help us to really understand this stuff more. And we want to understand you, but help us to be patient and long-suffering and just trust in the things that just are beyond us. We thank you, Lord. Amen. Have a good Sabbath.